Hands up, you thief! Ah!
I think you've got the wrong place.
Shut up!
Please, check my ID just once.
You're a thief!
This is my store. I'm the owner. Why would I steal?
Hands where I can see them. The voice cut through the quiet night like a blade. Fluorescent lights buzzed above the small corner store, flickering against the glass. Behind the counter, Marcus Reed froze, one hand clutching the barcode scanner, the other hovering near the cash register. His heart pounded, but his voice stayed steady. "Officer, this is my store. You're making a mistake." The gun didn't lower. Two uniformed cops stood in the doorway, their hands trembling just slightly, faces tight with adrenaline. The red and blue lights from their cruiser splashed across shelves of cereal and canned goods. "Drop it now." One barked. His tone wasn't a command anymore. It was fear disguised as control. Marcus slowly set the scanner down, palms raised, eyes locked on the officer's shaking finger over the trigger. I said, "Hands up. Step away from the register." Outside, a car door slammed. A neighbor's voice echoed faintly. "What's going on in there?" Marcus tried to speak again, but the officer was already moving, yanking him forward, twisting his arm behind his back, cold steel biting into his wrists. He stumbled, apron half-torn, the sound of his own breath loud in his ears. "Sir, please," Marcus said, voice low, steady. "Before you do this, check my ID." The officer sneered. "We'll check it downtown." A second later, the scanner hit the floor with a sharp crack. The camera above the counter blinked red, recording every second, and when they finally ran his ID, everything changed. Before that night, Marcus Reed lived a life defined by calm and order. Every morning at 6:30 he opened Reed's Market, the small corner shop his late mother had started nearly 30 years ago. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the soft hum of an old ceiling fan. The same three customers stopped by each morning: Mrs. Hampton from across the street for her paper, a construction worker named Daryl for an energy drink, and a high school kid named Eli for a breakfast sandwich Marcus always gave half off. He liked it that way, predictable, peaceful, decent. Marcus was 42, a tall black man with quiet eyes and a deep voice that never needed to rise to command respect. He had once worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a counterintelligence field agent who'd spent nearly 2 decades investigating corruption cases. He had the medals, the commendations, and the scars to prove it. But after his mother passed, he hung up his badge and came home. Atlanta still needs good men, he'd told his partner at the bureau before leaving. So he became a shopkeeper, not because he had to, but because it kept him connected to the kind of people he had always sworn to protect. He lived in the small apartment above the store, kept his mother's garden alive on the rooftop, and volunteered at a local youth center teaching conflict resolution to teens. He still carried his FBI identification, though now it stayed tucked in his wallet, a reminder of a life he thought was behind him. Neighbors trusted him. Kids waved when he restocked shelves. When police cruisers passed, Marcus nodded respectfully, still holding faith in the system he'd once served. That Friday evening had been long, the kind of humid Atlanta night that makes the air stick to your skin. He'd just finished restocking the freezer when the phone buzzed. His friend from church, Pastor Ellis, reminding him about tomorrow's donation drive. Marcus smiled, said he'd bring a few cases of bottled water. He didn't know that across the alley, a silent alarm had been triggered in the pawn shop next door. The system glitched, linking his shop's address as a possible secondary location, and within minutes, that small error would erase everything the neighborhood knew about Marcus Reed, turning a quiet shopkeeper into a suspect. As he locked a register and started counting bills, he thought only about getting home, feeding his dog, and calling it a night. But outside, the faint echo of sirens was already moving closer. The sound of sirens started as a low hum, distant, harmless, the kind of city noise Marcus had long stopped noticing. But then they grew louder, closer, urgent. He glanced up from the counter, confused. Outside, blue and red lights flashed across the window, bouncing off the open sign still glowing in the glass. His brows furrowed. "Strange," he murmured, wiping his hands on his apron. Before he could step outside, the front door slammed open. "Police, step away from the register." 2 officers rushed in, Officer Daniels, young and muscular, jaw tight, hand already on his weapon, and Officer McCall, older, jittery, eyes darting across the shelves. Marcus froze, hands instinctively "What's this about?" Daniels barked. "Put the money down. Step away from the counter." Marcus blinked. "I'm the owner. This is Reed's Market." "You've got the wrong quiet," Daniels shouted, cutting him off. "You think I haven't heard that before?" McCall's voice wavered, trying to sound firm. We got a report of a robbery in progress. Keep your hands where I can see them. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. A robbery? I think that's next door. Check the address. Daniels took a step closer, hand still on his gun. You match the description. What description? Black male, dark clothing, behind a counter counting cash. Marcus exhaled slowly. His FBI training told him not to escalate, not to argue. But humiliation stung sharper than fear. Officer, he said, carefully, I've spent my life working with law enforcement. You're making a big mistake. Then you should know what happens if you don't comply. The officer grabbed Marcus by the arm and twisted it behind his back. The barcode scanner hit the floor. The crack of plastic echoed through the store. Outside, a few people had started to gather. A woman gasped. Someone pulled out their phone and started recording. Hey, that's Mr. Reed. A teenage voice shouted from the sidewalk. That's his store. Daniels ignored it. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus tried again, voice low but firm. Please, check my ID in the wallet. McCall hesitated. Daniels, maybe we should. Daniels snapped. No, procedure first. Marcus was shoved against the glass door, the chill biting through his shirt. The sound of the cuffs clicking shut seemed to echo in his skull. He stared at his reflection, the apron, the keys still dangling from his belt, and wondered how quickly a life could be rewritten. Then came the crowd. Murmurs turned to shouts. Let him go. That's Marcus. You're arresting the wrong guy. Daniels raised his voice over the noise. Everyone back off. This is police business. The woman recording yelled back. Then you better get it right. Marcus felt a rush of shame and anger, not for himself, but for the look on the little boy's face outside the window, clutching his mother's leg, watching his hero in handcuffs. Inside, McCall started searching the counter. He found the stack of cash Marcus had just counted, the receipts neatly lined up, and a photo frame Marcus standing next to two men in suits. One of them wore an FBI lapel pin. Daniels, McCall said softly, you might want to look at this. Daniels waved him off. Later, McCall turned the frame around. He's in uniform, FBI. Look, but Daniels didn't. He was too busy reporting into his radio. Suspect detained. Possible armed robbery. Send backup. Marcus tried not to look at him, tried not to let the anger surface. He'd seen this before. The fear, the assumptions, the badge used like a shield for insecurity. He spoke calmly. Officer Daniels, listen to me carefully. You're about to make a mistake that's going to follow you for the rest of your career. Daniels glared at him. Are you threatening me? No, Marcus said. I'm warning you. Another squad car pulled up. The lights intensified, washing the store in blue. The air felt heavy. The hum of the refrigerators became a dull roar in Marcus's ears. McCall looked nervous now, eyes flicking from the frame to Daniels. Man, I really think we should check. Shut it, McCall. But the crowd outside was growing louder. Phones up, cameras recording. The narrative was shifting, and Daniels could feel it. His confidence faltered, but pride held tighter. He leaned close, whispering through clenched teeth. You people always got an excuse. Marcus stared at him. You people. Daniels flinched but said nothing. The moment stretched long, silent, electric, dangerous. Then a voice cut through the air from outside. A woman's voice, sharp, commanding. What the hell is going on here? Both officers turned. Standing just beyond the cruiser lights was Sergeant Rivera, their superior. Her presence changed the air instantly. Authority.com/control. Daniels straightened up. We got a robbery suspect, ma'am. Rivera's eyes narrowed, scanning Marcus, the apron, the name tag, the cuffs. A robbery suspect wearing his own name tag. The crowd went quiet. Daniels hesitated. Rivera stepped inside, her hand resting lightly on her holster but her tone cold as steel. Uncuff him, ma'am. I said, uncuff him. Marcus's eyes met hers. There was a flicker of recognition. Mr. Reed, she asked quietly. His response was calm. Agent Reed, technically, retired. Daniels froze, the blood draining from his face. And just like that, the narrative he had built began to collapse. The cameras outside were still rolling. The red recording light above the counter blinked steadily, capturing every second. What would happen next would turn a neighborhood incident into a national story. The store was silent except for the faint buzz of the ceiling light. Sergeant Elena Rivera's voice broke through the tension, calm but sharp. Uncuff him now. Daniels hesitated, his jaw tightening. Ma'am, we were responding to. She cut him off. To what? A false alarm. You think this man looks like a burglar? McCall's hand trembled as he fumbled for the key. The metal clicked, and the cuffs fell away from Marcus's wrists. He rubbed his sore skin, the red marks deep against his dark hands. Rivera stepped closer. Mr. Reed, I thought that name sounded familiar. Her tone softened. Marcus Reed. You were in the bureau, weren't you? Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Counterintelligence. 17 years. Daniels blinked. Wait, what? Rivera turned to him. Agent Reed trained half this precinct on threat assessment back in 2015. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the store's security camera humming quietly above them. Then Rivera reached for Marcus's wallet on the counter. She flipped it open. There it was. The faded FBI identification card, tucked behind his driver's license. Dispatch, Rivera said into her radio, voice calm but clipped. Verify federal ID number 9247 feed. Static. Then a pause. A voice replied. Confirmed. Marcus D. Reed, former special agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was heavy, thicker than the air itself. Daniels's face drained of color. McCall took a step back. Outside, the crowd erupted in a low wave of murmurs. A woman shouted, I told you. That's Mr. Reed. He's FBI. Another voice. They cuffed an agent. Are you kidding me? Phones lifted higher. More recording. The flashing red lights painted everyone in guilt. Rivera exhaled, pinching the bridge of her nose. Daniels, McCall, outside now. Daniels stammered. But, Sergeant, now. They stepped out. The door chimed softly as it closed behind them. Rivera turned back to Marcus. Sir, I'm deeply sorry. We received a misrouted call from the pawn shop alarm next door. The system flagged your address as a secondary hit. Marcus looked at her steadily, and they didn't bother to check. Her silence was answer enough. He glanced toward the window, a cluster of neighbors, filming, whispering, shaking their heads. Across the street, someone was already live streaming. The hashtag began to form in real time. Hashtag hands where I see A and see them. Rivera followed his gaze. It's going viral, she muttered. This footage is going to hit the internet before I even file a report. Marcus's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Maybe that's the only way things change. Rivera nodded slowly. Maybe it is. Outside, Daniels and McCall stood by the cruiser, faces lit by the blue strobe. Daniels was pacing, furious. They can't do this, he hissed. He was acting suspicious. Counting cash. McCall's voice cracked. Man, you heard the sergeant. He's FBI. We screwed up bad. Inside, Rivera gently lifted the photo frame from the counter, the one showing Marcus standing beside his former bureau director. She turned it toward him. You still keep this here? Marcus half smiled. Reminds me of the better days. When a badge meant something. Rivera hesitated. Would you be willing to give a statement at the station? We need to fix this officially. Marcus nodded once. I'll come, but I want a full copy of that security footage before I leave. She nodded. Already copied to my drive. A moment of mutual respect passed, two professionals recognizing the system they both once trusted had just betrayed one of its own. Then, as they stepped outside, the crowd parted. People whispered, pointed, gasped. The news van that had been cruising the block stopped right across the street. A reporter jumped out, camera rolling. A woman called out, "Is it true? They arrested a federal agent." Marcus didn't respond. Rivera placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Daniels stood frozen beside the cruiser, guilt and pride warring across his face. Rivera turned to him one last time. You owe this man an apology. Daniels looked away. I was just following protocol. Then you need to learn a better one, she said coldly. That night, the clip hit social media. Within hours, it was everywhere. Millions of views, angry comments, and one image repeated again and again. A black man in an apron, hands raised in his own store, while officers shouted at him. News outlets picked it up by morning. Atlanta shopkeeper detained by police turns out to be former FBI agent. #hands where I see A and see them trends. Nationwide as racial profiling debate rekindles, the shift had begun. The story was no longer about Marcus being detained. It was about why he ever had to be, and by dawn, the department's phones were ringing nonstop from the media, from the bureau, and from the mayor's office. What started as one false alarm had just become a national reckoning. The next morning, the Atlanta Police Department was in chaos. Phones rang nonstop, reporters crowded the front steps, and the name Marcus Reed was plastered across every local news ticker. The viral clip had exploded overnight. Millions of views, countless comments, and a tide of public outrage that couldn't be ignored. Inside the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed coldly over nervous faces. Marcus sat quietly at the end of a long metal table in the interview room. His wrists still bore faint marks from the cuffs. Across from him, Captain Harris, a broad man with a weary expression, flipped through a thin file. He didn't look up for a long moment. When he finally did, his face said it all. "Mr. Reed," he began, "on behalf of the department, I want to personally apologize for." Marcus interrupted, voice calm, measured. "Don't apologize to me, Captain. Apologize to the community that watched it happen." Harris cleared his throat. "You understand there was a miscommunication. A false alarm." Marcus's eyes lifted. "A false alarm doesn't point a gun at a man's head." Silence. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Outside the room, Sergeant Rivera stood near the window, arms crossed. She had filed her preliminary report before dawn. Every word, factual, detailed, and damning. The footage from the store cameras confirmed what the world had already seen. Marcus was alone, unarmed. Cooperative. The mistake wasn't procedural, it was personal. Harris finally sighed. "Internal Affairs is reviewing the incident. Officers Daniels and McCall have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying him. "Leave?" Harris avoided his gaze. "It's standard protocol." "Standard protocol," Marcus repeated quietly, "is what caused this in the first place." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The voice of a man who had spent years in interrogation rooms just like this. Only now he was on the wrong side of the table. The door opened. Daniels stepped in, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. His uniform looked suddenly too big on him. "Sir, I was told to sit," Harris said curtly. Daniels hesitated, then sat across from Marcus. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, Harris said, "Officer Daniels, Mr. Reed has agreed to meet with us before filing a formal complaint. I suggest you listen." Marcus turned to face him fully. "Why did you point your gun at me?" Daniels swallowed hard. "We got a report. A black male inside the store after hours, handling cash. Looks suspicious." Marcus tilted his head. "Handling cash? In a store that I own?" Daniels's jaw tightened. "We didn't know that. You didn't ask." The room went still. Daniels shifted in his seat. "You matched the description." Marcus's voice was low, steady. "What description was that?" Daniels hesitated. "Just black male, dark shirt." Marcus let out a breath. "Then maybe that's the real problem." Captain Harris rubbed his temples, the shame plain on his face. "That's enough, Daniels." But Marcus wasn't angry. He was composed, dangerously composed. Years of training in federal interviews had taught him how silence could expose truth better than shouting ever could. He leaned forward slightly. "You know what the irony is, Officer Daniels? I used to train new recruits on implicit bias. I used to tell them, fear makes you pull the trigger before thought catches up. I never thought I'd end up proving my own lesson." Daniels didn't answer. His eyes flickered downward. Then Rivera entered quietly, a printed report in her hand. "Captain," she said, setting it on the table. "FBI confirmation came through. Agent Reed's service record checks out, commendations, leadership awards, no disciplinary history." Harris nodded, scanning it quickly. "Understood." Rivera's eyes shifted to Marcus. "Sir, I also confirmed that the Bureau's Public Affairs Office received the video link. They've issued a statement." Harris frowned. "What kind of statement?" Rivera read from the paper. "The Bureau stands with former Special Agent Marcus Reed, whose service to the nation exemplifies integrity and restraint. We urge all law enforcement agencies to reflect on this incident and ensure accountability." The room fell quiet. Marcus stared at the table, not angry, not proud, just tired. Finally, he stood. "I've heard all I need to." Harris rose halfway from his chair. "Mr. Reed, if you'll allow us time to." Marcus shook his head. "Time's up. The truth is already out there." He turned to leave, stopping briefly beside Daniels. "You know what hurts the most? I used to believe the badge meant something sacred. Last night, you made me question that." Daniels looked away, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean," Marcus interrupted softly. "You did." Then he walked out. Outside, the lobby was filled with flashing cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions as Rivera escorted him through the chaos. "Agent Reed, how do you feel? Are you pressing charges? Do you think this was racial profiling?" He paused at the top of the steps, facing the crowd. The morning sun glared against his eyes, but his voice was calm. "I think what happened to me happens to people who don't get the chance to prove who they are," he said. "I just got lucky that someone hit record." The crowd fell silent. Rivera watched him step into the sunlight, proud and somber. She knew the truth had broken open now. The footage, the official statements, the world's eyes fixed on their precinct. The lie had collapsed under its own weight, and the people who built it were now the ones standing trial in the court of public opinion. By Monday morning, the story had become a national headline. Cable news anchors debated it. Hashtags surged, and public outrage grew louder with every passing hour. Hashtag hands where can't see them wasn't just trending, it was a mirror held up to America's conscience. In Atlanta, the police department scrambled to contain the fallout. An emergency press conference was called. The podium stood before a wall of cameras, microphones glinting under harsh fluorescent lights. Captain Harris stepped forward, his voice heavy with rehearsed sincerity. "We deeply regret the events of Friday night involving Mr. Marcus Reed," he said. "This department recognizes the gravity of the situation. Effective immediately, Officers Daniels and McCall have been suspended pending termination review. Furthermore, an internal audit of our bias training protocols will begin this week." The room buzzed with questions, but Marcus wasn't there to hear it. He was at home, in the quiet of his mother's old kitchen, reading the morning paper. His picture filled the front page, hands raised, eyes steady. The caption below, "Former FBI agent wrongfully detained in racial profiling incident." The phone rang constantly. Reporters, old colleagues, even bureau officials. He ignored most of them. When Sergeant Rivera called, though he picked up, "They're making it right," she said. "Not perfect, but right." Marcus smiled faintly. Right starts small. That afternoon, he walked into City Hall for a scheduled meeting with the mayor. The media waited outside, flashes popping like fireworks as he passed. Inside, the mayor and the police commissioner stood to greet him. "Mr. Reed," the mayor began, "on behalf of the city, I want to apologize." Marcus raised a hand. "Save it. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for a solution." He laid a single folder on the desk, a proposal titled The Reed Initiative. Inside, a program for mandatory racial bias retraining, community policing workshops, and a mentorship system pairing senior officers with minority youth. Marcus's voice was steady as he explained, "You can't just fire a few people and call it fixed. You rebuild the trust you broke. That's the only real justice." The mayor nodded slowly. "We'll fund it." By evening, every major network was running the story. Fired for profiling, Atlanta officers dismissed after wrongful detention of former FBI agent. Reed Initiative announced city pledges new bias reform. Crowds gathered outside Reed's market, cheering when he reopened the doors. A small girl handed him a handwritten note. "Thank you for standing up for us." He smiled, setting the note beside the register where it would stay for years. As the days passed, the fury shifted to reflection. Daniels issued a statement through his attorney. "I acted on instinct and was wrong. I will live with that mistake." McCall resigned quietly, later joining a community outreach program. For Marcus, the victory wasn't about punishment. He refused financial settlements, choosing instead to establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing criminal justice reform. "I don't want compensation," he said in an interview. "I want prevention." At the next city press event, Rivera introduced him to the crowd. "Some people tear systems down," she said. Marcus chose to rebuild one. Applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed. But Marcus didn't bask in it. He only nodded, the same calm look on his face he'd worn that night, steady, dignified, unbroken. When reporters asked why he wasn't angry, he answered quietly, "Because anger changes nothing unless it teaches someone to see." That line would be quoted in headlines across the country. Weeks later, a viral video surfaced again, the original footage side by side with the reforms it inspired. The caption read, "From fear to reform, how one man's calm changed a city." In the footage, Marcus was seen closing his store at sunset, same as before, lights glowing softly behind the window. Only this time, a police cruiser drove by, and the officer inside waved. Marcus waved back. The crowd that had once watched in shock, now watched in pride. Justice hadn't erased the pain, but it had left a blueprint, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus Reed believed in the badge again, not because it protected him, but because it could finally protect everyone. Justice doesn't always come from the courtroom. Sometimes, it comes from a single man who refuses to lose his calm in the face of humiliation. Marcus Reed didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back. He let the truth do the talking. The same patience that once made him an FBI agent saved him from becoming another statistic. And that's the tragedy. That restraint, not wrongdoing, is what kept him alive. But through that pain came change. A new law, a new program, a new conversation. Because one man's dignity forced a city and a nation to look in the mirror. In his final interview, Marcus said something that still echoes, "Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's truth." Those words became more than a quote, they became a promise. A promise that one mistake, one viral clip, can open 1,000 eyes. A promise that quiet courage can shake the loudest injustice. And a promise that no badge, no uniform, no system, stands above accountability. So tonight, remember his story. Remember that justice doesn't begin with anger, it begins with awareness. And awareness begins with people like you, who refuse to look away. Now let me ask you, what would you have done if you were Marcus that night? Do you think suspension was enough for those officers? Where are you watching from? If this story moved you, subscribe, because stories like this must be told. They remind us that the fight for equality isn't over. It's still happening, one truth at a time.